The gunshot echoed through the valley like thunder, startling Violet Langley so badly she pricked her finger with her sewing needle. Blood welled up against the white fabric of the drifter's shirt she'd been mending, and she quickly pulled her finger away, not wanting to stain the clean linen. Outside her small cabin on the outskirts of Park City, Utah, the summer of 1877 was making itself known with a scorching vengeance. The door to her cabin burst open, and a man she'd never seen before stumbled in, clutching his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, his face ashen beneath the layer of trail dust. "Help me," he gasped. Before collapsing onto her floor, Violet dropped the shirt she'd been mending and rushed to the stranger's side. He was a young man, perhaps in his mid-20s, with dark hair and several days' worth of beard. His clothes marked him as a drifter or cowhand: sturdy pants, worn boots, and a shirt that had seen better days even before the bullet tore through it. "Lord have mercy," Violet muttered, gathering her skirts to kneel beside him. She had come west to Utah Territory 3 years earlier at the age of 19, following the silver mining boom after losing her parents to influenza back east. Now at 22, she'd built a modest living taking in sewing and laundry for the miners and cowboys who passed through Park City. Living alone had taught her self-reliance, including basic medical care. The man groaned as she rolled him onto his back. "I need to see the wound," she said firmly. When he didn't respond, she set to work unbuttoning his shirt, revealing a nasty gash where a bullet had grazed his ribs. It was bleeding steadily, but didn't appear to have penetrated deeply, a lucky break for the stranger. Violet worked quickly, cleaning the wound with whiskey she kept for medicinal purposes, then stitching it closed with the same steady hands that earned her reputation as the finest seamstress in the territory. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd been mending a shirt when fate delivered her a man to mend instead. As she worked, the stranger drifted in and out of consciousness. Occasionally, he would mutter something unintelligible, his brow furrowed in pain. When she finished bandaging his side, she managed, with considerable effort, to drag him to her small bed. He needed rest, and the floor was no place for healing. It wasn't until the next morning that he fully regained consciousness. Violet had spent the night in her rocking chair, her Winchester rifle across her lap just in case whoever had shot him came looking to finish the job. "Water," he croaked, his voice rough with thirst. Violet rose and filled a cup from her bucket. "Slowly now," she cautioned, helping him sit up enough to drink. His eyes, she noticed for the first time, were a striking blue against his sun-darkened skin. They studied her with caution and something that might have been embarrassment. "Name's Nathan Quinn," he said after draining the cup. "I reckon I owe you thanks for patching me up, Miss Langley, Violet Langley." She stepped back, maintaining a proper distance. "Care to explain why you burst into my home with a bullet wound, Mr. Quinn?" he grimaced, adjusting himself against her pillow. "Would you believe me if I said it was a misunderstanding?" "That depends on the nature of the misunderstanding." Violet crossed her arms. "I don't harbor criminals, Mr. Quinn." "No, madam." His face was earnest. I am not a criminal. I was delivering horses to the Silver King mine when I came across some men rustling cattle from the tailor spread north of town. They saw me, took exception to witnesses, and, well..." He gestured to his bandaged side. Violet assessed him carefully. Her years alone had honed her instincts about people, and something in Nathan Quinn's direct gaze suggested honesty. "The law should know about this," she said finally. "Yes, madam, and I intend to tell Sheriff Hammond once I can stand without my insides threatening to spill out." He attempted a smile that turned into a wince. "That won't be today," Violet replied firmly. "You've lost blood, and moving around will tear those stitches." She returned to her sewing table where the drifter's torn shirt, the one she'd been mending when Nathan arrived, still lay. "I should finish this. Its owner will be coming by this afternoon." Nathan watched her as she resumed her work, her fingers deftly pulling needle and thread through the fabric. "You live out here alone, Miss Langley?" "I do." Her tone discouraged further inquiry on the subject. But Nathan persisted. "Isn't that dangerous for a young woman?" Violet's needle paused mid-stitch. "I find men are generally the most dangerous thing in these parts, Mr. Quinn, and yet here I am harboring one." He had the grace to look chastened. "Fair point." They lapsed into silence, the only sounds the rhythmic creaking of her rocking chair and the whisper of thread through fabric. Violet was acutely aware of the impropriety of having a strange man in her home, but the alternative, turning away someone in need, wasn't in her nature. By midday, the original drifter's shirt was mended, and Violet had started on Nathan's bloodied garment, salvaging what she could. He dozed intermittently, fevered dreams making him mutter and stir. The expected knock at her door came precisely at 3 o'clock. Jim Harker, the drifter whose shirt she'd been mending, was nothing if not punctual. "Afternoon, Miss Langley," he greeted, hat in hand. His eyes widened at the sight of Nathan in her bed. "I see you've got company." "Mr. Harker," she acknowledged, handing him his mended shirt. "Mr. Quinn had an unfortunate encounter with some rustlers. I'm merely providing medical attention." Jim's expression suggested he didn't entirely believe her explanation, but was too polite to say so. "Well, that's mighty Christian of you, Miss Langley." "Town's been buzzing about some cattle gone missing from the Taylor place. Reckon your friend might know something about that?" "He does, and he'll be speaking with Sheriff Hammond as soon as he's able." Jim nodded slowly, eyes still on the man in her bed. "You be careful, Miss Langley. Never know what trouble might follow a wounded man." He handed her a few coins for her work. "I'll see myself out." After Jim departed, Violet returned to Nathan's side with a fresh cup of water and some broth she'd prepared. "That your regular clientele?" Nathan asked, his voice stronger than before. "Mr. Harker passes through every few months with the cattle drives. He's always courteous and pays promptly." She helped him sit up to eat. "Unlike some, he doesn't presume familiarity." Nathan accepted the bowl of broth. "Message received, Miss Langley. I'll mind my manners." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Violet would tend to Nathan's wound in the morning, then set up her sewing near enough to keep an eye on him while she worked on orders for the townsfolk. Nathan, for his part, proved to be a surprisingly considerate guest, keeping conversation polite and never overstepping bounds. On the 4th day, when she changed his bandage, Violet was pleased to see the wound healing cleanly. "You're lucky," she remarked. "No sign of infection." "Blessed with a skilled nurse," he replied with a smile that, despite her best efforts, made something flutter in her chest. "Hardly a nurse, just practical experience." She secured the fresh bandage. "My father was a doctor back east. I assisted him sometimes." It was the first personal information she'd volunteered, and Nathan seemed to recognize the significance. "How did you end up here, if you don't mind my asking?" Violet hesitated, then sat in her chair. Perhaps it was the intimacy of tending his wound, or maybe just the loneliness of her isolated existence, but she found herself wanting to share. "My parents died in the influenza outbreak of '74. I was 19, with no close relatives and no prospects. The house and my father's practice barely covered his debts." She smoothed her apron. "I heard about the opportunities out west, how women were scarce and their skills valued, so I took what money remained and came to Utah Territory." Nathan listened attentively. "That took courage." "It took desperation," she corrected. "But I've built something here. It's not much, but it's mine." She gestured around the small cabin with its neat furnishings and colorful quilts, touches of beauty she'd created in the harsh frontier environment. "It's a proper home," he said with genuine admiration. "More than many can claim out here." The following morning, Nathan insisted on getting up. "I've imposed on your hospitality long enough, Miss Langley. That shirt of mine mended yet?" "It is." She fetched it from her work table, where it lay neatly folded, the tear in the side skillfully repaired with nearly invisible stitches. "Though I'm not certain you should be traveling. I need to report what I saw to the sheriff." He stood cautiously, one hand pressed to his side. "And I expect those horses I was delivering are causing concern by now." Violet watched him button the shirt. his movements careful but steady. She'd grown accustomed to his presence, the low rumble of his voice, the way he listened when she spoke as if her words mattered. The cabin would seem emptier without him. "I'll saddle your horse," she said, practical as ever. When she returned from the small lean-to stable, Nathan was standing on her porch, gazing out at the mountains that cradled Park City. Morning light gilded the peaks and the scent of pine carried on the breeze. "Beautiful country," he remarked as she approached. "It is," she agreed, handing him his horse's reins. He turned to her, his expression earnest. "I don't know how to thank you properly, Miss Langley. You saved my life." "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said firmly, "not anyone, not out here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out several coins. "Please, for your trouble." Violet looked at the money, then back at his face. "I didn't help you for payment, Mr. Quinn. I know that. But it's right that I compensate you for your time and supplies." When she still hesitated, he added, "Consider it payment for mending my shirt, then. I hear you're the finest seamstress in the territory." With reluctance, she accepted the coins. "Travel safely, Mr. Quinn. I hope you find those rustlers." He mounted his horse with some difficulty, grimacing as the movement pulled at his wound. "Miss Langley," he said, tipping his hat, "I suspect our paths will cross again." She stepped back, arms folded against a sudden chill despite the morning sun. "Good day, Mr. Quinn." As she watched him ride away, Violet tried to ignore the sense of loss that settled over her. Foolish, she chided herself. He was just a stranger she'd helped, nothing more. She had her work, her independence, that was what mattered. But for the first time since arriving in Park City, her solitary existence felt less like freedom and more like loneliness. The following week passed with Violet throwing herself into her work, taking on extra mending and even a wedding dress for the blacksmith's daughter. The familiar rhythm of needle and thread was soothing, the tangible results of her labor satisfying. If her thoughts occasionally wandered to a pair of striking blue eyes and a voice like warm honey, she firmly redirected them. She was hanging laundry in the yard when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart quicken. Shielding her eyes against the sun, she watched as a familiar figure rode toward her cabin. Nathan Quinn sat tall in the saddle, looking considerably healthier than when she'd last seen him. He dismounted with ease, leading his horse to the hitching post. "Miss Langley," he called, removing his hat. "Hope I'm not disturbing you, Mr. Quinn." She adjusted her apron, suddenly conscious of her wind-tousled hair. "I see you've recovered, thanks to your ministrations." He approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "I spoke with Sheriff Hammond about what I saw. They caught 2 of the rustlers trying to move the cattle across the state line." "I'm glad to hear it." An awkward silence fell between them. Nathan twisted his hat in his hands. I've taken on a job at the Taylor Ranch. As thanks for reporting the rustlers, Mr. Taylor offered me work breaking horses. It's good, steady employment." "Congratulations," Violet said, wondering why he was telling her this. "The thing is, Miss Langley." He cleared his throat. "I find myself in need of a new shirt. Trail life's been hard on this one." He gestured to his current shirt, which indeed showed signs of wear. "I wondered if you might make me one. I can pay, of course." Violet studied him, suspecting this wasn't just about a shirt. "I usually mend, Mr. Quinn. I don't often sew garments from scratch. But you could. I've seen your work and it's mighty fine." She couldn't help but smile at his persistence. "I could, yes. You'd need to be measured. Whatever's necessary." He followed her into the cabin when she beckoned, standing patiently as she fetched her measuring tape and notebook. As Violet took his measurements around the chest, across the shoulders, down the arms, she was acutely aware of his closeness, the warmth radiating from him, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Professional distance, she reminded herself. "How did you learn to sew so well?" He asked as she noted down the numbers. "My mother taught me. She believed a woman should have skills to support herself if needed." Violet stepped back, tucking the measuring tape into her pocket. "A foresight that served me well." She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Violet moved to her fabric shelf. I have some cotton that would make a serviceable shirt. Blue might suit you. She pulled out the bolt of fabric. It will take me about a week with my other orders. No rush, he assured her. I'm not going anywhere. The way he said it with quiet certainty made her glance up sharply. Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. Mr. Quinn, Nathan, please. His voice was gentle. After you've seen me at my worst and saved my life, I think we can dispense with formalities. At least when we're not in public. Propriety demanded she refuse, but Violet found herself nodding. Very well, Nathan, though I must insist on proper address if others are present, of course, Miss Langley. She hesitated, then offered, Violet, when we're alone. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Violet, he repeated, as if savoring the name. Over the next few weeks, Nathan found reasons to visit Violet's cabin. Sometimes it was a legitimate errand, checking on the progress of his shirt, bringing her a brace of rabbits from his hunting, or delivering a package from town that saved her the trip. Other times, his excuses were flimsier, asking her advice on a horse with a sore hoof, or bringing her wildflowers he claimed were just growing by the trail. Each visit lasted a little longer than the last. He would sit in her spare chair as she sewed, telling her stories about the characters he'd met in his travels across the West. She found herself sharing more about her life back east, the dreams she'd once had of becoming a schoolteacher before circumstances forced a different path. You could still teach, he suggested one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Park City's growing, they'll need more teachers soon. Perhaps, she contemplated the idea, though I've grown accustomed to my independence. Teaching comes with expectations about a woman's behavior, more restrictive than a seamstress, different restrictions. She smiled ruefully. A teacher must be above reproach in all things, no riding alone, no entertaining gentlemen callers, certainly no harboring wounded drifters. Nathan chuckled. Then the children of Park City have lost a fine potential teacher. The day she finished his shirt, Nathan arrived with a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. A gift, he said, placing it in her hands, to thank you properly for saving my life. Inside was a beautifully carved wooden sewing box with compartments for thread, needles, and small scissors. The lid bore an inlaid design of mountain wildflowers. Nathan. Violet ran her fingers over the smooth wood, genuinely touched. This is exquisite. Made it myself, he admitted, a hint of pride in his voice. I've been working on it in the evenings. The ranch foreman let me use some scraps of hardwood. I didn't know you were a woodworker, he shrugged. Jack of all trades, you pick up skills on the trail. He watched her examine the box. Do you like it? It's the most thoughtful gift I've ever received. She placed it carefully on her table, then presented him with his completed shirt. And here's yours, though it pales in comparison. Nathan held up the shirt, admiring the precise stitching and perfect fit. I've never owned anything so fine. Try it on, she urged. I want to be sure the measurements are correct. He unbuttoned his old shirt without hesitation, slipping it off to reveal the still pink scar along his ribs where she had tended his wound. Violet felt her cheeks warm as she averted her eyes, though as his nurse, she had seen more of him before. The new shirt fit perfectly, the blue fabric bringing out the color of his eyes just as she'd hoped. He looked transformed from the dusty drifter who had collapsed on her floor weeks ago. How do I look? He asked, spreading his arms. Quite presentable, she replied, trying to sound matter-of-fact despite the flutter in her stomach. The color suits you. His smile told her he saw through her attempted nonchalance. I'll wear it proudly. How much do I owe you for your work? Violet named a fair price, which he paid without haggling, adding a little extra that she tried to refuse. Please, he insisted. Your work is worth it. As he prepared to leave, Nathan lingered at the door. There's a social at the church this Saturday evening. Music, dancing, pie auction. That sort of thing. He shifted his weight, suddenly looking less confident than she'd ever seen him. Would you consider attending? With me, the invitation startled her. They had built a friendship of sorts, but a public outing together was different a statement to the community. "I don't often attend town gatherings," she said carefully. "I know, the foreman's wife mentioned you keep to yourself." He took a step closer. "But I'd be honored to escort you if you'd allow it." Violet considered her options. Attending the social with Nathan would certainly cause talk, but was that really so terrible? She had lived blamelessly in Park City for 3 years, earning respect for her work if not close friendships. Perhaps it was time to step beyond the safe boundaries she'd created. "Yes," she said finally. "I would like that." His face lit up with such genuine pleasure that any lingering doubts she had vanished. "I'll come by at 6 on Saturday then." After he left, Violet stood in her doorway, watching until he disappeared around the bend in the trail. The wooden sewing box sat on her table, tangible proof of the care he'd invested. It had been so long since anyone had thought about what might please her, what might make her work easier or her days brighter. Saturday arrived with a flurry of anticipation. Violet spent the morning washing her hair and pressing her best dress, a deep green cotton with a lace collar that she had saved for special occasions, though few had presented themselves in Park City. She pinned her hair up more elaborately than usual, allowing a few curls to frame her face. Nathan arrived precisely at 6, wearing his new blue shirt under a clean black vest, his boots polished and his hair neatly combed. He brought his wagon rather than riding horseback, a considerate touch that would spare her dress from trail dust. "You look beautiful," he said simply when she opened the door. The social was held in the churchyard, with tables of food arranged under lanterns strung between trees. A small band played lively tunes, and couples were already dancing on a wooden platform constructed for the occasion. As Nathan helped Violet down from the wagon, she felt the curious stares of the townsfolk. She recognized most of them customers who brought her mending or laundry, but had never socialized with them beyond business transactions. "Miss Langley," greeted Mrs. Thompson, the mercantile owner's wife. "How lovely to see you here. We've missed your company at our gatherings." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. May I introduce Mr. Nathan Quinn? He works at the Taylor Ranch." "Mr. Quinn." Mrs. Thompson's assessing gaze took in his appearance and the obvious care with which they had both dressed. "I believe I've seen you in the store. You have good taste in sugar candies." Nathan smiled charmingly. "A sweet tooth, madam. Can't deny it." More introductions followed as they moved through the crowd. Violet was surprised by how welcoming everyone was, though she detected an undercurrent of curiosity about her relationship with Nathan. She had underestimated how closely small communities observed their members, even those who kept to themselves. "Punch." Nathan offered, guiding her toward the refreshment table with a light touch at her elbow. "Please." She welcomed the chance to pause and observe the gathering. The evening air was warm, scented with pine and the sweet fragrance of pies waiting to be auctioned. Children chased each other around the perimeter of the churchyard while their parents socialized. It was a scene of community harmony that Violet had watched from a distance for years. "Why did you ask me to come tonight?" she questioned quietly as Nathan handed her a cup of punch. He considered his answer carefully. "Because in all your time here, you've built a life but not a home. A home needs connections, people who see you and know you." His blue eyes held hers. "And because I wanted everyone to see us together." The directness of his response left her momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a reply, the band struck up a new tune, and Nathan extended his hand. "Would you do me the honor of this dance, Miss Langley?" Dancing was not something Violet had done since leaving the East, but her body remembered the steps. Nathan proved a capable partner, guiding her through the lively reel with confidence. His hand at her waist was respectful but warm, his movements matching hers as if they had danced together for years. As they twirled among the other couples, Violet felt something long dormant awaken within her joy, pure and simple. She laughed when Nathan executed a particularly skillful turn, and the sound of her own laughter surprised her. "You should do that more often," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Dance, laugh, it suits you. They danced 3 more sets before taking a break, cheeks flushed and breathing quickened. Nathan fetched them water and they found a quiet spot near the edge of the gathering to rest. Sheriff Hammond approached them, nodding politely. Miss Langley, Mr. Quinn, enjoying the festivities. Very much, Sheriff, Violet replied. Good to see you out and about, Miss Langley. The lawman turned to Nathan. Quinn, I wanted to let you know we caught the last of those rustlers, found him trying to sell those cattle down in Provo. Your information was mighty helpful. Glad to hear it, Sheriff. The Taylors are good people, didn't deserve to have their stock stolen. After the sheriff moved on, Violet gave Nathan a sidelong glance. You didn't tell me they caught all the rustlers. Didn't want you worrying. He paused. I should have mentioned it, shouldn't I? Yes, you should have. But she smiled to soften the rebuke. I'd like to know about things that matter to you. The pie auction began with the preacher's wife calling out enthusiastic descriptions of each confection. Nathan leaned closer to Violet. I hear this is where gentlemen show their intentions, by bidding high on a particular lady's pie. Then I'm safe, as I didn't contribute a pie, he chuckled. A pity. I'd have bid my month's wages. The evening continued with more dancing and conversation. Violet found herself introduced to more people than she'd met in her previous 3 years in Park City. Nathan seemed to know everyone, or at least have a knack for easy conversation that bridged any gaps. As the night drew to a close, Nathan drove Violet home under a canopy of stars. The wagon creaked along the trail, a comforting sound in the quiet darkness. Thank you, Violet said as her cabin came into view. I enjoyed myself more than I expected. I'm glad. He brought the wagon to a stop and helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Violet, he stopped, seemingly gathering his thoughts. She waited, heart pounding inexplicably. I'd like to call on you, properly? His eyes searched hers in the moonlight. With your permission. The request was traditional, respectful, acknowledging that their friendship was evolving into something more. Violet had not anticipated this when she took in a wounded stranger, had not planned for the way he would gradually become essential to her days. Yes, she said, the word barely above a whisper. I'd like that. His smile was radiant. He lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Violet Langley. I'll see you tomorrow. True to his word, Nathan began calling on Violet regularly. On Sundays after church, which she now attended, sitting beside him in the small wooden building, he would accompany her home for dinner. Sometimes they would ride into the hills surrounding Park City, Nathan pointing out the best fishing streams or patches of wild berries ripe for picking. As summer mellowed into early autumn, their relationship deepened. Violet found herself sharing confidences she had never told anyone, her fears when she first arrived in Utah territory, how she had cried herself to sleep for months after her parents' deaths, the dreams she still harbored of someday having a family of her own. Nathan, in turn, revealed his own past. Born in Missouri, he had left home at 16 after his mother remarried a man who resented his presence. He had worked his way west, taking jobs on ranches and with cattle drives, learning various trades but never settling. What made you stay in Park City? Violet asked one Sunday afternoon as they sat by a mountain stream, a picnic spread between them. Nathan skipped a stone across the water, watching it bounce 5 times before sinking. Started with a job, he said thoughtfully. Stayed because of a woman who mended more than just my shirt. The simple honesty of his answer warmed her. He had a way of speaking truths without embellishment that cut through her carefully maintained defenses. Their first kiss came naturally, on her porch as fireflies blinked in the gathering dusk. Nathan had been telling her about the new colt born at the Taylor Ranch, his hands animated as he described the foal's wobbly first steps. Violet had been watching his face, captivated less by the story than by his evident joy in sharing it with her. When he paused, noticing her attention, something shifted in his expression. Violet, he murmured, stepping closer. She didn't back away. Yes, His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb gently tracing her cheekbone. "May I kiss you?" Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tender, questioning at first, then deepening as his arms encircled her waist and pulled her closer. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment you stitched me up," she laughed softly. "Even while delirious with fever, especially then. My guard was down." His arms tightened around her. "Violet Langley, I think I'm falling in love with you." The declaration should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like coming home after a long journey. "I think I'm already there," she admitted. As autumn progressed, Nathan became a fixture at Violet's cabin. He chopped wood for her winter stores, repaired loose boards on her porch, and installed better locks on her doors and windows. In return, she kept him well fed and made him another shirt, this one flannel, for the colder months ahead. Park City accepted their courtship without much fuss. If anything, the townsfolk seemed pleased to see the solitary seamstress and the once drifting cowboy finding happiness together. Mrs. Thompson from the Mercantile even went so far as to comment that they made a handsome pair when Violet came in for supplies. It was late October when Nathan arrived at her cabin with an unusually serious expression. He had been away for 3 days helping drive cattle to winter pastures, and Violet had missed him more than she cared to admit. "What is it?" she asked after greeting him with a kiss. "You look worried." "Not worried, thinking." He took her hand and led her to the porch chairs. "Violet, I've been offered a job." "Another job, but I thought you were happy at the tailor's." "I am." He squeezed her hand. "This is different. The Silver King mine is expanding operations. They're building new offices in town and need someone to manage their horse stock buying, training, keeping them fit for the mine inspectors and executives." Violet frowned, trying to understand his concern. "That sounds like an excellent opportunity." "It pays better than ranch work," he agreed. "And it would mean a house in town. The company provides housing for its management staff." "A house in town," she repeated, beginning to see what had him so thoughtful. "Nathan, this is wonderful news. Why do you seem troubled by it?" He took both her hands in his. "Because I don't want to live in that house alone, Violet. I want to live there with you. As my wife." The world seemed to still. Even the birds in the nearby pines fell silent, as if holding their breath along with Violet. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Her voice was barely audible. "I am." He shifted from the chair to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "I love you, Violet Langley. When I stumbled into your cabin half dead from a bullet graze, I had no idea I was stumbling into the rest of my life. But here we are, and I can't imagine my days without you in them." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision of his earnest face. "Nathan, you don't have to answer right away," he said quickly. "I know it's sudden, yes," she interrupted, tightening her grip on his hands. "Yes, I'll marry you." His face transformed with joy. He surged up to pull her into his arms, lifting her from the chair and spinning her around on the porch. Her laughter joined his, floating out across the valley like a promise. That evening they sat close together on her small sofa, making plans for their future. The Silver King mine wanted Nathan to start in 2 weeks, which meant a whirlwind of preparations if they wanted to be married before moving into the company house. "It won't be a grand wedding," Violet cautioned, practical even in her happiness. "There's not much time to prepare." "I don't need grand." Nathan's arm was warm around her shoulders. "Just you, a preacher, and maybe a few friends to witness." They were married on the first Sunday in November, with golden aspen leaves carpeting the ground outside the white clapboard church in Park City. Violet wore a dress of deep blue that she had worked on secretly in the evenings, with intricate embroidery at the collar and cuffs, small white violets intertwined with sturdy oak leaves, symbols of their names and new life together. Nathan, resplendent in a new suit purchased from the Mercantile, watched with undisguised adoration as she walked toward him down the church's center aisle. Mrs. Thompson had insisted on decorating with autumn flowers and ribbons, and the small building was transformed into a harvest celebration. Never seen a more beautiful bride, Sheriff Hammond commented to Nathan as Violet approached, her face radiant beneath a simple veil. Nor will you again, Nathan replied with absolute certainty. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan's kiss was tender yet possessive, a declaration and a promise combined. The small congregation, mostly townsfolk who had come to care for the couple, erupted in cheers. The celebration afterward was held at the Thompsons' large home, with tables groaning under the weight of dishes contributed by the women of Park City. Music, dancing, and generous toasts filled the afternoon and early evening. As twilight approached, Nathan found his bride chatting with the blacksmith's daughter, whose wedding dress Violet had sewn months earlier. "Mrs. Quinn," he said, enjoying the way the name made her smile, "our carriage awaits." Their carriage was actually the mine manager's buggy, loaned for the occasion to transport them to the honeymoon cabin that the Taylor family had offered, a hunting lodge in the mountains where they could spend a week in privacy, before returning to start Nathan's new position. They departed amid a shower of rice and good wishes, Violet's cheeks flushed with happiness as Nathan guided the horses out of town. The cabin was rustic but cozy, with a large stone fireplace and sturdy furniture. Nathan had arranged for supplies to be delivered earlier: food, firewood, and a bottle of fine whiskey from the mine manager as a wedding gift. As night fell, bringing with it a chill mountain wind, Nathan built a roaring fire while Violet unpacked their small trunks. The domestic simplicity of the task, hanging his shirts beside her dresses in the cabin's small wardrobe, filled her with quiet joy. "Wife," Nathan said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. He nuzzled the sensitive spot behind her ear. "I like the sound of that." She leaned back against his chest, savoring his strength and warmth. "Husband," she replied, testing the word on her tongue, "it suits you." His chuckle rumbled against her back. "Does it now, MMM?" She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. Though drifter had its charms as well. "I'm done drifting." His expression grew serious. "Found where I belong." Their first night as husband and wife was a revelation for Violet. Nathan's patience and tenderness eased her nervousness, his obvious devotion making her feel treasured rather than merely desired. By morning, she had discovered that love could be expressed in ways her sheltered upbringing had never prepared her for, and that the physical connection between husband and wife could be as profound as the emotional one. They spent their honeymoon week exploring the mountains by day and each other by night. Violet discovered Nathan's passion for fishing, while he learned of her unexpected talent for identifying wild herbs and plants, knowledge gleaned from her father's medical books. On their final evening at the cabin, snow began to fall, fat, lazy flakes that transformed the landscape into a wonderland of white. They sat wrapped in blankets on the cabin's small porch, watching nature's quiet display. "I never thought I'd have this," Violet admitted, her head resting on Nathan's shoulder. "After my parents died, I was so focused on survival that happiness seemed extravagant, not extravagant," he corrected gently. "Necessary, like breathing." His arm tightened around her. "I want to make you happy every day, Violet Quinn, even the hard days." She turned her face up to his. "You already do." Their return to Park City coincided with the completion of their new home, a tidy 2-story house near the mine offices, with a fenced yard and a small barn for Nathan's horse. It was grander than anything Violet had dared imagine for herself, with actual glass windows in every room and a kitchen large enough for a proper table where they could share meals. "What do you think?" Nathan asked anxiously as he carried her across the threshold. Honoring tradition, despite having already spent a week as husband and wife, Violet took in the polished wood floors, the cheerful wallpaper in the front parlor, and the gleaming cookstove in the kitchen. "It's perfect," she breathed, overwhelmed by this tangible symbol of their new life together. Nathan settled into his role at the Silver King with remarkable ease for a man who had spent most of his life outdoors. His natural way with horses extended to a natural way with people, and soon he was respected by miners and executives alike. Violet, meanwhile, continued her sewing business from a sunny room at the front of their home. Her reputation had only grown, and she found herself with more orders than ever, particularly after Mrs. Thompson spread word that she was considering expanding into dressmaking as well as mending. Their first Christmas as a married couple was a joyous affair. They decorated their home with pine boughs and red ribbons, and Violet baked cookies from her mother's recipes. Nathan surprised her with a gift that brought tears to her eyes, a rocking chair crafted by his own hands, with the same wildflower design he had used on her sewing box. "For when we have little ones to rock to sleep," he explained as she ran her hands over the smooth wood. The suggestion of children warmed her heart. Though they had not specifically discussed starting a family, Violet had begun to hope for it, especially when she saw how gentle Nathan was with the town children. Winter passed in a contented blur of work and domestic happiness. Violet discovered the pleasures of having a permanent partner in life, someone to share meals with, to discuss the day's events, to hold close during cold nights. Nathan proved to be not just a passionate lover, but a thoughtful husband, surprising her with small kindnesses like hot coffee ready when she woke or fresh flowers on the kitchen table. As spring thawed the mountain snow, bringing new life to the valley, Violet began to suspect that new life was forming within her as well. She kept the suspicion to herself at first, not wanting to raise hopes prematurely. But by late April, when her courses had been absent for 2 months and the morning sickness became impossible to hide, she knew it was time to share the news. She prepared Nathan's favorite meal, venison stew with dumplings, and set the table with special care, using the good dishes that had been a wedding gift from the mine manager and his wife. Nathan noticed the extra attention when he returned home that evening. "What's the occasion?" he asked, hanging his hat on the peg by the door and crossing to kiss her. "Can't a wife welcome her husband home properly?" She smoothed her hands down her apron, suddenly nervous. His eyes narrowed slightly. "She can, but this one usually has flour in her hair or pins between her teeth when I get home, not a perfectly set table and that look on her face." "What look?" "Like you're bursting with news." He took her hands in his. "What is it, Violet? Did something happen today?" She nodded, unable to contain her smile any longer. "Something has been happening for a few months now, actually." She placed one of his hands on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby, Nathan, sometime in November, I think." His expression transformed from confusion to wonder in an instant. "A baby," he whispered, his hand spreading wider across her middle as if trying to protect what couldn't yet be felt. "You're sure?" "As sure as can be without a doctor's confirmation. All the signs are there." With a whoop of joy, Nathan lifted her off her feet and into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. "A baby," he crowed. "Violet Quinn, you magnificent woman," she laughed, clinging to his shoulders. "Put me down, you'll make me dizzy." He complied but kept his arms around her, his face alight with happiness. "Boy or girl doesn't matter, healthy is all I pray for. And if it takes after its father in stubbornness," she teased, "then God help us all." He kissed her soundly. "I love you, Violet. More today than yesterday, and tomorrow will be more still." The news of their impending parenthood spread quickly through Park City. The women of the town rallied around Violet with advice, hand-me-down baby clothes, and offers of assistance when the time came. Mrs. Thompson organized a sewing circle specifically to create a quilt for the Quinn baby, with each woman contributing a square. Nathan, meanwhile, channeled his excitement into preparing their home. He built a cradle, carving it with the same wildflower design that had become his signature, and began construction on a proper nursery adjacent to their bedroom. As summer progressed, Violet's body changed with the season. Her dresses needed letting out, and her steps grew slower as the baby within her grew larger and more active. Nathan was attentive to her every need, insisting she rest more and take on fewer sewing commissions. "The town can find someone else to mend their shirts," he said firmly when she protested. "You need to conserve your strength." "I'm pregnant, not invalid," she reminded him, though privately she appreciated his concern. The summer heat made her more tired than she liked to admit. In September, as aspen leaves began their annual turn to gold, the town of Park City received exciting news: a real doctor was establishing a practice, moving from Salt Lake City with his family. Dr. Wilson and his wife arrived with their 3 children, taking up residence in a house not far from the Quinns. Nathan wasted no time in introducing himself and arranging for Dr. Wilson to visit Violet. The doctor confirmed what they already knew: a healthy pregnancy progressing normally, with the baby due in early November. "Just in time for your first wedding anniversary," Dr. Wilson observed with a smile as he packed away his stethoscope. "A fitting gift, wouldn't you say?" Autumn brought cooler temperatures and relief for Violet, who had struggled with the summer heat in her condition. She resumed light sewing work, focusing on baby clothes and small items that didn't require the concentration of her usual commissions. Nathan's work at the mine kept him busy as they prepared the horses for winter operations, but he always made time to attend to Violet's needs. He hired a local girl, Jenny Parker, to help with housekeeping and cooking, ensuring Violet wouldn't overtax herself in the final months of pregnancy. As her due date approached, Violet found herself reflecting on the remarkable turn her life had taken. Just over a year ago, she had been a solitary seamstress living on the outskirts of town, independent but alone. Now she was Mrs. Nathan Quinn, with a lovely home, a devoted husband, and a community of friends who cared for her. And soon, a child would complete their family. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked one evening as they sat by the fire, her feet in his lap as he massaged her swollen ankles. "How quickly life can change." She smiled, one hand resting on her rounded belly where the baby kicked energetically. "And how grateful I am that it did. All because a stranger with a bullet wound stumbled into your cabin," he mused, his fingers working out the tension in her feet. "All because I was mending a drifter's torn shirt." She laughed softly at the memory. Nathan's eyes grew serious, his hands stilling on her feet. "Do you remember what I said to you that day when I brought you my shirt to make, after I'd healed? You said many things that day." "I said mend mine next, then stay forever." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. Forever, Violet, that's what you've given me." Tears welled in her eyes, pregnancy making her more emotional than usual. "And you've given me a home, Nathan. Not just a house, but a real home." Their son was born on November 3, 1878, almost exactly 1 year after their wedding day. The labor was difficult but uncomplicated, with Dr. Wilson attending and Mrs. Thompson serving as midwife. Nathan paced the hallway outside their bedroom for 12 hours, wearing a path in the carpet and startling at every sound from within. When finally the cry of a newborn pierced the early morning stillness, Nathan nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Thompson opened the door moments later, her face weary but triumphant. "Congratulations, Mr. Quinn. You have a fine son and your wife is doing well." Nathan entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Violet lay propped against pillows, her face pale and drawn with exhaustion but radiant with joy. In her arms, wrapped in one of the blankets she had sewn during her pregnancy, was a tiny red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. "Come meet your son," she said softly as Nathan approached. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, afraid to disturb either of them. The baby seemed impossibly small, his wrinkled face scrunched in sleep. One tiny fist escaped from the blanket. "He's perfect," Nathan whispered, reaching out to stroke the downy head with one careful finger. "Just like his mother." Violet smiled tiredly. "I was thinking we might name him James after my father, James Quinn." Nathan tested the name and nodded approval. A good, strong name for a good, strong boy. He leaned forward to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. You were amazing, Violet. I've never been more proud or more in awe of anyone. They named him James Nathan Quinn, honoring both Violet's father and his own. The citizens of Park City welcomed the newest member of their community with enthusiasm, bringing gifts and meals to ease the new parents' adjustment. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and new routines as they learned to care for their son. Nathan took time away from the mine to help, changing diapers and walking the floor with James when he was fussy, giving Violet precious hours to rest. By their first wedding anniversary, which they celebrated quietly at home, Violet had regained her strength and James had settled into a more predictable pattern. He was a good-natured baby with his father's blue eyes and what promised to be his mother's smile. Happy anniversary, Mrs. Quinn, Nathan said, presenting her with a small package after James had been put to bed. Inside was a gold locket, simple but elegant, with their initials entwined on the cover. When opened, it revealed a tiny portrait of James on one side with space left for future children on the other. It's beautiful, Violet breathed, immediately fastening it around her neck. I'll treasure it always. Like I treasure you, he replied, drawing her into his embrace. This has been the best year of my life, Violet, and I have a feeling the next will be even better. Life settled into a pleasant rhythm for the Quinn family. James grew from infant to toddler, his personality emerging as a blend of his father's adventurous spirit and his mother's quiet determination. At 2, he was sturdy and talkative, following Nathan around the yard and helping Violet with her sewing by handing her spools of thread and occasionally unraveling them when she wasn't looking. Nathan's position at the Silver King mine had evolved to include overseeing all transportation horses, wagons, and the new narrow-gauge railway being constructed to connect the mine to the main line. The additional responsibility came with increased pay, allowing them to expand their home with a larger kitchen and additional bedroom. Violet's sewing business had transformed as well. With Jenny Parker still helping with household duties, Violet was able to focus on the creative aspects she enjoyed most. She had developed a reputation for fine dressmaking, with clients coming from as far as Salt Lake City for her designs. Her workroom, once a single sunny space at the front of the house, now occupied an entire wing, with 2 young apprentices learning the trade under her guidance. In the spring of 1881, when James was 2.5, Violet discovered she was expecting their second child. The news delighted Nathan, who had been hoping to give James a sibling. A brother to fish with or a sister to spoil, he declared, swinging James up onto his shoulders. What do you think, son? Would you like that? James, not entirely comprehending but sensing his father's excitement, clapped his hands. Fish, he shouted, his current favorite word. Their daughter, Elizabeth Violet Quinn, arrived in November 1881, another autumn baby with her mother's delicate features and a dusting of blonde hair unlike either parent. James approached his new sister with solemn curiosity, allowed to hold her only while seated firmly in Nathan's lap. Gentle, Nathan instructed as James patted the baby's hand. She's very small. My baby, James declared possessively, setting the tone for a relationship that would be both fiercely protective and occasionally combative as they grew. By 1885, Park City had transformed from a rough mining town to a prosperous community. The discovery of additional silver veins had brought increased investment, new businesses, and more families. The Quinns had become fixtures in town life, Nathan serving on the town council, and Violet helping organize the annual Miners' Festival that celebrated the town's heritage. Their children thrived in the mountain environment. James, now 7, attended the town school and showed an aptitude for mathematics and a love of horses that mirrored his father's. Elizabeth, at 4, was already demonstrating her mother's eye for color and design, arranging flowers and ribbons with surprising skill for her age. On a warm summer evening, as they sat on their front porch watching the children play in the yard, Violet leaned against Nathan's shoulder with a contented sigh. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked. "If those rustlers hadn't shot you, or if you'd stumbled into someone else's cabin," Nathan's arm tightened around her. "Sometimes. But then I remember what my grandmother used to say, that the Lord works in mysterious ways. Maybe those rustlers were just instruments of fate." Violet chuckled. "That's a rather generous view of men who tried to kill you." "Well, they failed at that but succeeded in leading me to you, so in a strange way I'm grateful to them." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Besides, I like to think we would have found each other somehow, even without the bullet. Some things are just meant to be." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, James and Elizabeth raced across the yard chasing fireflies, their laughter echoing in the summer air. The scene was so perfect, so complete, that Violet felt tears prick her eyes. "What is it?" Nathan asked, noticing her emotion. "Just happy," she assured him, nestling closer. "Remembering that day you brought me your shirt to mend and asked me to stay forever." Nathan smiled, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners the way she loved. "Best proposition I ever made." "And the easiest one to accept," she replied, reaching up to touch his face, still handsome despite the lines that 8 years of marriage and parenthood had etched there. "I love you, Nathan Quinn. And I love you, Violet Quinn, forever and always." Their life together was not without challenges. The mining industry had its booms and busts, and Park City weathered economic uncertainties along with the rest of the country. A fire in 1888 destroyed several buildings in town, including the church where they had married. The harsh mountain winters occasionally isolated the community for weeks at a time. But through it all, the foundation they had built remained solid. Their children grew, their home expanded to accommodate Nathan's mother when she was widowed a second time, and their place in the community deepened with each passing year. By the turn of the century, Nathan and Violet had been married for 22 years. James, at 21, had followed his father into the mining business, though his interest lay more in the engineering aspects than in horses. Elizabeth, 18 and as beautiful as her mother, was preparing to attend a women's college in the East, an opportunity Violet had never had but insisted upon for her daughter. "Times are changing," Violet remarked to Nathan as they helped Elizabeth pack her trunks for the journey. "Women can be more than wives and mothers now." "They always could be," Nathan replied, watching his daughter carefully fold the going-away dress Violet had made her. "You proved that, running your own business while raising our children. Elizabeth learned from the best example." Violet smiled at the compliment, though she noted the silver now liberally streaking Nathan's dark hair, the lines around his eyes deeper than before. They were no longer young, but their love had only strengthened with the passing years. As Park City entered the 20th century, the Quinns remained one of its most respected families. Nathan eventually retired from the mine, turning his attention to breeding and training horses on the small ranch they had purchased outside town. Violet's dressmaking business continued to thrive, though she now focused on designing and left most of the actual sewing to her apprentices, many of whom had gone on to establish their own shops throughout Utah. James married a local girl, Sarah Donovan, and built a home near his parents' ranch. Elizabeth returned from college with a teaching degree and a determination to establish a proper high school in Park City, which she accomplished with her parents' enthusiastic support. In 1925, Nathan and Violet celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a gathering that included their children, 5 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild, along with most of the town's residents. The celebration was held in the community hall that had been built to replace the church lost in the fire decades earlier. As they stood to receive congratulations from friends old and new, Violet, now 70, leaned close to her husband. Did you ever imagine when you stumbled into my cabin all those years ago that we would be here today? Nathan, his once vigorous frame now slightly stooped but his blue eyes as bright as ever, smiled down at her. I hoped for it, from the moment you finished mending my shirt. He squeezed her hand, the same strong, gentle pressure she had come to rely on throughout their life together. Best decision I ever made, asking you to stay forever. Violet's eyes misted with tears of joy as she looked out at the legacy they had built together, not just their children and grandchildren, but the community they had helped shape, the lives they had touched. From a lonely seamstress and a wounded drifter to the foundation of a family dynasty spanning generations. And the easiest promise I ever kept, she replied, leaning into the comfort of his embrace, knowing that whatever years remained to them would be faced together, just as they had faced everything else with love, courage, and unbreakable devotion. As evening fell and the celebration continued around them, Nathan led Violet outside to the porch of the community hall. The mountains stood silhouetted against the sunset, the same eternal peaks that had witnessed their beginning. "Dance with me," he asked, holding out his hand just as he had at that long-ago social where they had first danced together. No music played outside, but they needed none. Swaying gently in each other's arms, they moved to the rhythm of a lifetime shared, of promises kept and dreams fulfilled, of a love that had begun with a torn shirt and a bullet wound, and had endured through 50 years of joy, sorrow, challenge, and triumph. "Forever," Nathan whispered against her silver hair. "Forever," Violet agreed, her heart as full as it had been on the day she became his wife. And in that moment, as twilight embraced the mountains and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their story came full circle, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures, the deepest loves, the most enduring legacies begin with the simplest of gestures and the courage to say yes to forever.